Karen, how did you find Carnivore?
Well, Dave, do you want the long version or the short version? So basically, I've been fortunate enough to be working in natural health for 40 odd years. And slowly but surely, I went from being vegetarian, vegan for 20 years. And in 1999, I woke up one morning and I needed chicken. And so And so from then onwards, it was quite a joke in the family where my husband says, Karen eats chicken, we all eat chicken, because he'd gone down the road with me with vegetarian, vegan, and various other aspects like herbs and colonic irrigation. And, a lot of the work that I've been my first guinea pig and he's been my second. And then basically from 1999, I went on low carb, and then major stresses in life. We moved to New Zealand from the UK in 2003. Lots of stress when we got here, and my weight skyrocketed due to stress and hormones and menopause, and um, went up 25 kilos. So 2007, I decided I was going to do something about it, and this sort of builds. It's just a building really, and so I specialized in allergy testing in the early 90s. And so I put a list together of low inflammatory food, which was low carb, of course, because majority of the inflammatory foods are relatively high in carbohydrates and other chemicals. And so I put this list together and I felt much better. And then I put some remedies together. It took me 3 years of experimenting and the weight just dropped off. And so once people saw me, because I was in practice, I had a clinic. Once people saw me, they wanted to do what I was doing. And so my program, Fast Track to Health, was born, which was low carb, intermittent fasting. And of course, the medical profession was saying that it was dangerous because it was low carbohydrate and this was in 2010. And I knew it wasn't dangerous because I felt amazing. And anyway, as time went by, I had hundreds of clients going through the low carb thing. And then one day in 2017, one of my clients came into my clinic and said, Karen, have you heard of the carnivore diet? And I went, no. And, and she explained on it. And I went, okay, because my training in nutrition was basically vegetarian, vegan training. And then I sort of went, okay, I'll have to research this. And so, like many of your listeners, I'm sure, went through all the videos, all the books and everything, and it started to make sense to me. And also when I look back, I had clients who said they felt so much better when they just ate meat and they didn't feel like having the vegetables. And as a practitioner, I used to say, oh, well, maybe if just have a few, just have a few vegetables because, the science that I've learned was all around having enough variety and everything else. And so in 2020, I decided, right, I'm going to do a month. So this was January 2020. I went on Carnivore and I felt really, really good. And then, of course, we all know what went on in 2020. And so I went back to eating my healthy, except for far too much wine. I think, I've never drunk as much wine as I did in 2020 with the lockdowns and I knew something was wrong. I knew it wasn't real, but, that's another story. And so the great thing about the lockdowns, apart from drinking lots of wine, it gave me lots of time to dive even more into the research. And of course, there was a lot more coming up all the time. And so in October 2020, I went completely vegan. Not vegan. I went completely carnivore, and then I started offering it as a sort of alternative to the low inflammation. And the interesting thing with that is once I put it on my website, I started getting phone calls from medical doctors about it. And although in my career, I've treated and had clients that have been medical doctors, especially when I had a clinic in London. But really and truly, I've never really had doctors phoning me up and asking me about the diet and everything. And one of them was a neurologist from one of the hospitals further down in New Zealand. And it turns out that he now recommends all of his Parkinson's and other um, people who are suffering with neurological disorders, he gets them onto the carnivore diet, encourages it anyway. And so that's a really cool, thing that's happening. And that's what I'm loving about it is I'm meeting people all the time who are going, yeah, I'm doing carnivore too. And it's like, yay, it's really cool. And I sort of see carnivore as the ultimate rebellion because it goes against the mainstream and how we're being, people have been pushed into the vegan thing. And I know how detrimental the vegan thing is for me. The thing I found with these other dietary regimes is I was just hungry all the time,
Right.
and I wasn't feeling sated, you know, and and it just didn't suit my body type. I know there's a few body types that it does suit, but the majority of us, and especially the majority who um, need to reduce weight to be healthy, basically it doesn't suit our body type. I mean, I'm quite a muscular body type, and so consequently I need lots of protein and and to keep my metabolism going, and fat, of course. And so that's why I see it as a ultimate rebellion, because it's just I think it's quite fun.
Yeah.
And yes,
So for you, um, when you got started completely carnivore in October 2020, after, you know, the previous decades of vegetarian, vegan, and then, you know, you had been doing low carb, but
yeah,
you'd kind of gone on the bit of the, like most of us around the early 2020, you gone on the kitchen drinking kind of thing. Um,
yeah.
what did you notice after you went completely carnivore? Like, what changed for you?
Yeah, there was a lot of things that happened, to be honest. Although I was relatively healthy, I would say, I didn't struggle with aches and pains too much. I've always been able to walk and stuff. But what I noticed was, first off, the thing was I didn't have any cravings. So basically, my go-to was things like potato crisp, potato chips when I was stressed. Because for me, and for most, I think, is we tend to gravitate towards something that gives us a short, sharp burst of energy when we're stressed. And I know for me, when I was younger, being a bit of a stress cadet, and also I've had chronic fatigue, which is what brought me into natural health in the first place. Um, Basically, if I get stressed, I'll go towards those potatoes, and I'm not a big other thing. But the other thing I noticed is, looking back on my journey, is slowly I got even more energy. So I got um, more ability to go and do more. So I sort of didn't have to pace myself, which is what I've always had to do. Since I've had the chronic fatigue tendency, I don't have chronic fatigue anymore, but now I don't have the tendency. I tended to pace myself, and I tended to sort of really conserve my energy, because I knew that even if I sort of went full tilt, cleaned the whole house, and just, I knew if I did it all in one go, I'd pay for it the next day. Whereas now, I basically can do it all in one go, and the next day I don't have any aches and pains. I don't have any fatigue. I can get up and do my normal day. Now, of course, I can just walk. I never, I don't have to go, oh, I'm just going to do half an hour walk or anything. I can just walk all day. And I think that's hugely beneficial. I actually think that's how we should be. I think that's how human beings' health should be. We should be ultimate health, which is what I'm always been aiming for, is to be able to feel good all the time. Of course, if you injure yourself, you're not going to, but we should be very resilient. Our immune system should be great. And also, that's another thing, is ever since being carnivore, I haven't had a cough, a cold, or of any description. And so I see it as having boosted my immune system. And I've been exposed to people who've had the usual flus and everything else, and I've never got anything. And I do think that it really makes a big
I
difference.
think that's a really interesting point, and it's a good reminder even for myself. Because when I look back, I don't remember when I last had a cold.
Mm. Yeah.
I've had the feeling of things coming on, like, when you kinda later in the day, sometimes you feel like, "Oh, have I got a cough coming on? Have I got a sniffle coming on?" or something like that. "Is this gonna be a
Mm.
cold or a flu?" But then the next day you wake up and it's fine.
Yeah.
I've never had anything in the last 3 years, kind of progress to an actual cold or a flu. Um,
Yeah.
but, one thing I wanted to ask that you mentioned was about stress. Do you
Mm.
feel like those potentially stressful situations now, you can deal with them better?
Absolutely. That's one. Um, I call it the carnivore calm. I feel that we all have stressful situations, and sometimes they can be incredibly stressful. Um, and so I've noticed now, so for example, I've run a business for years, and the highs and the lows of running a business is incredibly stressful, especially with IRD and all of that sort of stuff, because that's not my jam. I
So,
really don't
sorry,
understand.
just to clarify, IRD is like the tax office or something?
Yeah,
Ah.
inland revenue. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Different countries, different terminologies, but the accounts and all that sort of stuff, I don't enjoy. And so that time when it gets really, really stressful, I used to get, that's when I went for the chips, and that's when I went for that sort of thing. And also, so with the carnivore, what I found is it doesn't affect me anymore. And I can't say that I don't have stress. It doesn't affect me anymore. I take it, I just look at it and go, okay, I've got to deal with that. And I just write it down and then I deal with it. Whereas it's I don't get that anxiety, and I don't get that, oh my God, I've got to do this. I don't get that anymore.
It's interesting. It feels like it becomes like just something to add to the to-do list rather than a sense of something that's going to cause this massive anxiety and
Mhm.
panic and stuff. And I totally I hate doing anything related to accounting or tax. So I totally
Yeah,
relate to that. But yeah, it feels like it's now more of a it's just, it's on the to-do list. I don't wanna do it. I don't like to do it, but it's just gonna get done.
absolutely. And things do get done now. So it just goes on the to-do list. I don't, and also actually, that's one thing I hadn't really thought of it before, is I don't procrastinate anymore. I really don't. I just go, oh, I'll go and do that. I think what I can feel is there's more joy that, it's like my work. I love my work. I empower people. And so I love it. And now I love it even more. And I never would have said that before, but basically what I love is being able to show up and just be me. And I don't pretend anymore. I can be much more myself. And I would say it's definitely part of the carnivore journey, because, I'm blessed to have other people I've been working with and who have felt exactly the same. So it's not just me.
Mm.
And I'm sure, Dave, you've spoken to people that have been exactly the same, where we're basically, oh, this is a great club to belong to. And meeting others that are doing the same, it's like, yeah, we resonate. Yeah, we're enjoying life. And and I think that's what it's brought for me, is the joy back into life. The joy of food as well. And what I've noticed is I used to have a lot of variety, even within the carnivore. I used to think, oh, I'll get chicken skins and I make chippies out of chicken skins, and I'll make, I'll just have lots of different things. I have pork and chicken and all of these things. And what I've noticed is, not because I wanted to cut down even more, is I've noticed I'm gravitating much more to just beef, eggs, butter. I do have broths. I have beef bone broth and chicken broth, but I don't tend to sort of like, oh, I need a variety. I need a change. Where I think before, in the low carb thing, I always wanted something different, something, you know.
It's
And I,
it's almost like that feeling of, it's one of those you need to do substitutes kind of thing. It's like that feeling of needing to make the low carb bread or that kind of thing, right?
yeah, yeah. Well, I've done all of those, and you know, I was a chef when this is my first training in my teens, and so I was a chef, so I can whisk stuff up pretty quick. And I was known before carnivore as the salad queen. So if ever we went out for meals, or to friends' houses, I'd bring this beautiful, glorious looking salad. And now I'm not. Now I'm the brisket. Now I'm the brisket queen, because we always take a brisket when we go to someone's house, because I'm really, really good at cooking brisket and it tastes delish. And I could eat brisket every day, and but we don't, because we can't get that much brisket at the moment. But it's steak or mince and stuff. And I never would have thought I'd have been a mince queen, but I've found ways to make mince divine.
Yeah.
And so,
So
yeah,
what's your day-to-day eating like? Like, how many times are you eating and what is it made up of?
I have 2 meals a day. Um, it depends on how hungry I get. Whether so I still do the intermittent fasting, and so I have lunch around 2, 3 o'clock, and that consists of 4 eggs. And if there's any leftover beef, I have beef as well. I don't tend to eat any more than that. I have a lot of butter with my eggs, though, a lot of butter. And then in the evening, we sort of try to have dinner 6 o'clockish, and it'll mainly be big steak, big butter, um, or beef, lamb. Being in New Zealand, you can get a lot of lamb. Um, and so it's just a big roast, really, and I eat as much as I want.
That's awesome.
So Fast Tracks of Health was started in 2010, and has been evolving for the last 15 years. But in 2022, I was getting a huge amount of clients who were either jab injured, or they were being affected by shedding. And shedding's a very real thing. And and so basically, I wanted to be able to help people. And so I sort of drew on my previous experience of, we used to have a clinic in London which we dealt with incurables diseases, and people who had been through the whole gamut of having chemotherapy and radiation and all of those sorts of things. And basically the doctors had said, we can't do anything more for you. So that was the majority of our clients at that time. And so we put them through fasting regimes and stuff like that. And it worked. But I was thinking to myself, how can I get people to do fasting without water fasting? Because a lot of time it would be too stressful for people to go from a normal diet into water fasting. Whereas normally I would have done juice fasting. So I introduced broth fasting so that they're getting nutrients that can help heal the gut and help, just basically give nutrition while they're giving their digestive system a rest and actually healing the digestive system. And so that's how my program Ultimate Detox came about. I didn't advertise it or push it as a detox of all of the toxins we've been exposed to. I just sort of called it the Ultimate Detox, and clients came from that.
So when you've had clients come to you and you're modifying their or helping them to modify their diet, how many clients, like approximate percentage, kind of move over to a carnivore way of eating?
Ooh, that's a great question, Dave. I would say 70%. First off, they go on the low inflammatory and they feel good and they start releasing weight and everything else. And often, especially if they've got a lot of weight to drop or a lot of health issues, very often they will then gravitate to carnivore because they get a bit stuck. So they think, because I sort of do different I do challenges and stuff and things in my groups. And so if they're not on carnivore, I just say, right, just try carnivore for a week and see how you go. And that's how it often happens. And they go, oh, well, I feel good on carnivore, and they just keep going. And so what I've noticed is I have a 12-week challenge with Fast Track to Health. So basically the 6 weeks is easing into carnivore. And then the next 6 weeks is carnivore plus fasting. And I do 24-hour fasts. So I do 1 or 2 a week. And then I've done 48, I've done the 72-hour fasts and stuff like that. And I do challenges with that. But what I found is the beautiful souls who stay carnivore stay in the group for support and just to be able to chat about things. And so, but yeah, it's about 70%, and they stay carnivore.
Right. So the cool thing about eating this way is you don't really have to convince people to stick with it. The
No,
convincing is really just convincing to try. Once you've
yeah,
tried it for long enough, like, it's a self-perpetuating eating plan, right?
yeah, and I see it as a lifestyle, and so and that's how I sort of get my clients to see it after that. Is basically it's a lifestyle. Now, if you go away on holiday, it doesn't mean to say that you can't go and do all the beautiful food all around the world. You're not going to want to go to France and not experience all the things. You're not going to want, but most of them, when they do go on holiday, they come back and they go, oh, it's so good to be able to go back onto my usual regime. I feel so much better. And I think that's what happens. That's what health is about, isn't it? Like you're not masking anything. You're not taking loads and loads of pills. And that's what I love about the carnivore. You don't have to take loads and loads of supplements. And I mean, I do recommend minerals. And for some women, especially if they've got thyroid issues, I make sure that they're taking enough selenium and iodine and zinc, and adrenal stuff too. But if we've got the minerals mastered, I see those as the foundations of our health. And if we've got the foundations right, that means that we can really build very strong our bodies. And so you get the foundations right, minerals, essential fats maybe, but you get that with our food. And so as long as you're eating nose to tail, and if you can't bear offal like liver and stuff, which I must admit, I'm not a fave. Not my fave. So I get it from local companies, and I get them to get the capsules of liver and other offals. So make sure that the nutrition is satisfied. So the main thing, the main reason I get them to do liver and stuff is the minerals, but also making sure they've got enough copper, and especially if they're going to do fasting. So if you do fasting, what happens is you've got all these different, your audience will know this, but you've got all these different sort of beautiful actions that are going on in our body the longer you fast. Even if you only fast for 24 to 36 hours, you need copper. So because you need copper to create your copper peptides. And if you get copper peptides, right, especially specific ones, then consequently you can stimulate your stem cells. And you can do that using fasting. So if you go 36, 48 hours, then your stem cells start really waking up. And then after that, they create daughter stem cells. And so it becomes perpetuating. So the results of a 72-hour fast can last for approximately 6 weeks, where your stem cells are still activated. And that's what I love about the incorporating fasting. But there's a big but, is you have to be fasting fit. So you have to do it slowly, because if you try, say for example, you've gone carnivore from a standard Western diet, that's quite a big shock to the body in the first place. And then I've heard of lots of people go, okay, I'm not feeling as good as I thought I would. And I've heard about this fasting lark. So you've been on carnivore for 5-6 weeks and you're not feeling it. You're not letting the weight go. Right. I'll go on a 72-hour water fast. And what that does is, yes, you can feel better because it's giving your digestive system a rest. But what that can do long term is it can perpetuate the stress response. And by having a stress response, then what happens is your body becomes even more conservative. Instead of boosting up your metabolic rate and your metabolic flexibility, it can actually be long-term detrimental. So I get clients gently into these fasting, just like I get everyone gently into carnivore. And I'm sure many of your watchers have done that, or they might have been lucky, gone straight into carnivore, and they've been fine. But we're all different, and so what I've learned over the years of doing this is, if you do it slowly, like anything health wise, if we do it slowly, it gives the body time to really do the deep healing work. And that is how I see carnivore. It's doing deep healing work, and it takes time to do that. It took time to get us into a situation. It took time for me to get chronic fatigue. It took time for me to recover. But if we do it too fast, then you've got a lot of toxic residue that has to be got rid of, and the liver, the kidneys, the skin, the lungs, the bowels can't cope. And that's when people go, oh, this didn't work, you know? And it works, but you have to do it in a nice, gentle fashion. And I think being gentle on self is the best thing you can possibly do. And it's like loving self, isn't it? If you love yourself, you do it gently.
Mm. Well, that's really interesting. I hadn't heard that, the part about the copper being so important with fasting. That's really interesting.
Yeah, so all the minerals are really vitally important for our hormones. And so, but also for our stem cells, for everything really. they're vital constituents. So many people think, oh, zinc for immunity. Well, we need zinc to create cortisol. We need zinc to create healthy skin, healthy nails. And, it's much, much more than immunity. Same with magnesium. Magnesium is my sort of passion, really, as far as the minerals. It's the right on top. If we don't have enough magnesium, we don't make enough digestive enzymes. If we don't make enough digestive enzymes, then our ability to digest and utilize everything we eat is impaired, and that includes supplements. So if you've already got low magnesium and you're taking magnesium supplements, what often happens is, especially certain forms of magnesium, it acts as a laxative. So it means it's not actually being absorbed into the bloodstream to get to where we want it. And so I get clients to do transdermal just simply because when I trained in nutrition in the 80s, I knew I needed magnesium. And every time I took a form of magnesium, I didn't notice any difference. And then it was in 2006 when I was back in the UK, and one of my ex-students came up to me and said, Karen, have you tried this? And it was transdermal magnesium. And I put it on my skin and I felt the difference immediately. And so that to me was a sign that it's gone into the, I'm not saying that you can't take tablets and everything, but if you're low in magnesium, it's much easier to top yourself up using it via the skin than it is via the mouth.
Yeah,
And so,
I've heard that, maybe it was on a Bart K video, I'm not sure, but I've heard it, someone else talking about spraying the magnesium on your skin, and if it goes in,
yeah,
then you needed it.
yeah. Also, if it itches or if it's a bit scratchy, a bit painful,
Mm.
then your need for magnesium is even higher than you think. So I get clients to use it 4 or 5 times a day on their skin. And then I've got a gel. It's much easier to use than the spray because the spray goes everywhere. But basically, if you do that, then you top yourself up, and then you can choose to use the other forms because then you're going to be absorbing everything. But so magnesium, magnesium, magnesium. Because also the other thing is, if we don't have enough magnesium, we don't make perfect insulin. So if we don't make perfect insulin, our insulin receptors can't talk to one another. And so we get insulin resistance. And so it can be a root cause of insulin resistance, metabolic syndrome, and even diabetes. It's a huge, huge part of what we need. And we need it for everything, really. But those are the ones that I tell people about. And they go, oh, okay, that makes sense. Because because I don't know about you, but, we've been trained in nutrition and stuff. And we were trained mainly in vitamins. The minerals were sort of like pushed aside as sort of like little sisters. We don't really need to talk to them.
Yeah, I always kind of had this thing in the back of my mind when I thought vitamins are primary, minerals are just kinda whatever. We'll probably get those anyway kind of thing.
Yeah, except for when the soils are depleted. And here in New Zealand, naturally, our soils are depleted in selenium and iodine. And so, of course, we've got a huge amount of thyroid issues because we need selenium to activate our T4 into T3. We also need selenium to actually process within the liver. And there's so much more. But also, and then iodine, of course, thyroid again. So thyroid hormones and everything else. And of course, they're putting fluoride in our water again. And so fluoride pushes out iodine in the thyroid so it can muck things up if you don't have enough iodine in the first place. And so, they're very, very critical, the minerals, and so salt. So I most of us are depleted in salt, and there's lots of people talking about salt. And so I get my clients onto Himalayan or Celtic salt sole, so the saturated solution, tablespoon twice a day, to really top themselves up. And that tends to work really well because you've got the other trace minerals, which helps with everything really. And so it's the simple things. That's what I love about it. Is it's the simple things that make all the difference. And so I get gelatin. I get people to use gelatin a lot. So this was in 2012, before beef bone broth became really popular, and you can now get powders and things. But in New Zealand, in those days, you couldn't get powders or anything. And I thought, how am I going to get clients to use beef bone, make beef bone broth? Because I knew how beneficial it was, how important it was. And so I got them onto gelatin to make lemon jellies. And I still do that because I think gelatin is so beneficial to our gut health, our bone health. Well, all aspects again, it's the collagens and things, and it's real food rather than all the collagen powders and things that are available. Not that there's anything wrong with them, but do we need food that's processed so much, you know?
Yeah.
And yeah, the least amount of processing, the better, I think.
Yeah, I think that's yeah, spot on. Once something's been really processed, I have a hard time trusting it, because processing involves a profit motive somewhere. So, you know.
Yeah. One of my clients went into a health shop, and he's one of these ones that goes down big rabbit holes, mega rabbit holes and stuff. So he got a collagen powder, and it was a common one. I can't remember the make, but anyway, and he got some out, and he put a magnet over it, and there were all these little metal things in it. And so I went, oh, that's interesting. And he complained to the company and everything. He never heard anything back, of course. But, you just don't know what's in things. And that's why I think, the, the better off we are is to get the raw materials, make them ourselves as much as we possibly can, or really dive into companies and find out what they're about. Because like the gelatin companies, for example, when I first started recommending it, I found there was one in the US. I think it was Now Nutrition or something. And I phoned them up because I wanted to know if the gelatin was grass fed, if the cows were grass fed, and free range and all that sort of stuff. And so they assured me it was, because it doesn't say on the packet, because there wasn't many available at that time. I think there was Great Lakes, and they were good, but there was organic at the time, and they're no longer organic. And so, all of these things change, and I get clients to be avid label readers, because we used to have a company which was called Organics, I think, and they had a broth powder. And I said, if you can't make your own broth, then use this one. And then 2 years down the track, I had a look at the label, because I don't tend to buy them. Looked at the label, and they'd started putting rice bran, fillers in them. And that's what made me realize is they're always changing the label, but they don't change the look of it. So you automatically think that it's the same that you've always been buying, and it's so not true. And it's like the supplement companies, for example, Solgar vitamins. I don't know if you get those, but I used to trust them in the UK because I knew the owners, and I knew that the nutritionist was very passionate and so this was many, many years ago. And I found out about 4 years ago that they'd been bought out by Nestle. So why would you trust them? And then
It's got
I find
that's
out,
got disaster written all over it.
hasn't it? I mean, why would you trust what's in there? And then there's another company called Livestream, which sell chlorella and blue-green algae and things. And it's a New Zealand company. It's been going for years. I used to use it many, many years ago when I was, vegetarian to supplement. And I found one of their products and it's got maltodextrin in. Now, maltodextrin is far worse than blooming sugar. So why would a supplement company have this rubbish in it? And why would you trust them? It's what's really changed in the 40 years of working in nutrition is small companies that had really, really good products, that had integrity, and you could talk to them, have all been bought out by the big giants. So my thing is why would you trust them with your health? I've got a I've got a real sort of deep distrust of the medical profession, as you might have gathered, and that's born of many years of researching for myself. So basically, my journey with my health is quite a long one. But why did I get chronic fatigue in the first place? And so that's why I sort of I use sort of diagnostics and energy machines and things. And I remembered my mum telling me that I had really, really good health. I didn't have any coughs, colds, or anything until I went to the dentist and they put a filling in my baby teeth. And from that day on, I had severe ear infections. And they gave me multiple things of tetracycline, which is an antibiotic that discolors teeth. And so, of course, I can't have white teeth because they damaged my teeth. What else did it damage, And then I remember going to school one day and they gave us the polio vaccine on a sugar cube. I'd had it already, I'm sure, but on a sugar cube. And from that day forward, I had severe eczema. So I had really bad eczema in my eyes, my arms and legs. And then, of course, tried everything that was available. And then when steroid creams became available, it gave me a huge amount of relief, especially with my eyes, because you can imagine it being so itchy and everything. And that sort of led on to 18-year-old, severe headaches. I never had headaches. And I've not been one of those people that get headaches. Severe headaches. And I was working 3 jobs at the time because I was saving up to go traveling. And so, I went to the doctors and I didn't see we had a family doctor at the time. It was sort of in a village, family doctor. Didn't see, there was a locum. And this woman said to me, "Oh, you've got, it's something you've eaten, you know." And at 18, I just went, okay, I don't want this headache anymore. I'm not going to eat. Next day got even worse. Went to see another locum and they told me, I can't remember what it was, they told me, and told me to go away, you'll be fine, And then the next day went again, saw another locum and they said, "Oh, you've got sinusitis. Here, antibiotics." 2 days later, I collapsed at work and got taken home, and our family doctor was back and he did blood tests, and it turned out I had glandular fever and cytomegalovirus. And he said I should never have been given those antibiotics. I was in bed for 3 months. So as an 18-year-old, a very active 18-year-old who had a goal of going traveling. So my goal was to go traveling around sort of Northern Europe from about April, and I was in bed then. And so I made sure that I was good, and then met my boyfriend in France. We did grape picking and stuff. But that was the last time I really went to the doctors. I really had anything doctors. So apart from when I got pregnant.
So, Karen, if people want to get in contact with you, and find out more about what you do, how can they reach out?
All right. So you can find me in lots of places, but my programs and things on karencreighton.com. And also my book, Carnivore to Carnivore, is in there too. I've got quite a few groups on Facebook. So there's Carnivore to Carnivore group on Facebook that you can find, or you can just friend me, Karen Creighton. You can tell I've got white hair, and I think I'm wearing this jacket. No, I've got a different jacket on that one. And so you can find me and friend me, and just tell me that you've seen the interview with Dave, because I get quite a few friend requests, and some of them are bots, and so I normally tend to message and ask if you're real. I hope you won't get offended, and also I've got an email, so karencreighton444@gmail.com.
Awesome. I'll link to all of those in the show notes. Karen,
Thank you.
thank you so much for coming on and sharing your story and experience. I really appreciate your time.
Thank you so much for having me, Dave. It's been great. It's been a lovely way to spend some time.